So obviously there's some really challenging things going on in our supply chain world at the moment, and this week I thought I'd answer some questions that one of our subscribers has sent in. They're really great questions, and it's all about what's going to happen after the coronavirus pandemic in our supply chains. So that's coming right up. Okay, so thank you for sending in your questions, and this one I thought was really good, and it's a question that I've been asked a lot on our recent webinars. In fact, if you haven't been on those webinars, I'll put a link down below the video. But the first part of the question is, how willing would a company be to return its operations back to China after investing and relocating operations to other countries following coronavirus? I'm not sure that companies necessarily have been moving factories, but certainly they will have been moving suppliers. And I think that's going to be one of the very interesting things from a supply chain perspective that comes out of this whole pandemic. Because what's happening is so many companies have placed a reliance on China as their primary sourcing country. They've been caught out. What they're doing now is they're diversifying across a number of different countries and a number of different suppliers. And I think that's going to be a core thing to come out of this. Yeah, I was watching this really interesting video on the element of trust. And, you know, China has kind of become a bit of an outsider around the world at the moment, unfortunately. I think due to the lack of communication during the early days of the pandemic, there was a lot of healthcare materials being sent out of China, which then didn't appear to be very good quality. And I think, to be honest, China's going to suffer for that long term, and people may be reluctant to actually go back to sourcing everything from China, but I'll come back to that point in a minute. The next part of this really great question was, how well do companies typically plan for disasters like the coronavirus? With supply chains becoming even more global in the 21st century, what kind of future measures or preparations should businesses consider when planning their operations abroad? Wow, great question. Will this change supply chains significantly? Look, the first thing I would say is, how do you plan for a disaster like a pandemic like this? This is a once in a generation thing. But I think what I would say is that supply chains have become a lot leaner, and probably too lean in recent years. And so we were very susceptible to something like this, and the degree of flexibility and buffer and so on in supply chains these days just isn't as good. So I think maybe one of the things that companies will do is to be a little bit more careful about their inventory management and their sourcing, and perhaps holding a little bit of buffer stock maybe for their A-lines. But I don't think you can actually plan for this. I mean, what are we going to do? Hold 6 months of inventory in our supply chains? That's really just not practical. And the third part of the question, what countries are inadvertently benefiting from the massive shutdowns and supply chain shifts, and what sectors are experiencing the most damage? Gee, I feel like a politician getting a three-part question here, but thank you for... Sorry, I didn't write down who posted the question. I'll acknowledge you on the video. That's really good. So what countries are inadvertently benefiting? I don't know it was such a good idea filming this outside. We've got some lorikeets on the bird table behind me who come in every morning to be fed. Maybe the other ones I'll do inside. So what countries are inadvertently benefiting? Look, I think other low-cost country sourcing countries like India and Bangladesh and Vietnam, and to a certain degree Thailand, are probably benefiting. A lot of sourcing had to move to those countries. Oh, they're being noisy, aren't they? Oi! They haven't got their breakfast yet. That's why they're being noisy. Pat will put out their breakfast shortly. What sectors are experiencing the most damage? I saw an interesting report on this last night, actually. And on the one hand, there are loads of sectors that are doing well. Obviously, you know, food, cosmetics, funnily enough. Anything that's going to be used in the home. Bread makers are really going well. The things that are not going so well are probably fashion and sporting goods. And, you know, even if they were able to deliver those online, they're suffering a little bit. So the other element that I wanted to talk about, was trust. I did touch on that. And I think trust is going to become much more important in the supply chain in years to come. We want to know that there's going to be continuity of supply. We want to know that there's going to be good quality. And I think, a lot of our systems are going to be focused towards that. But look, I'm going to have to give up because these birds are not going to shut up until they get their breakfast. So thank you very much for the question. Do keep the questions coming in. And I do promise the next video will be from inside, away from these noisy little blighters. Okay, so you know how this works. If you're not subscribed to the channel, do hit the red button down below and hit the bell. That way you'll be notified every time we have a new video coming out, and they do come out every Wednesday. And also do post your questions below. I mean, there's so many questions coming out these days on supply chain. Do comment what you're seeing out there on supply chain. And I'll put that link to the webinar that we're running at the moment. We're running it every couple of days live, just to update people on some of the things that they ought to be doing. So thanks for watching, and see you soon.